You ever watch a movie like Coraline or Wallace and Gromit and just your brain kind of breaks a little bit? You're sitting there thinking, how? How on earth do they make these little puppets, these tiny, detailed worlds, feel so real, so alive? It's this amazing mix of sculpture, photography, and honestly what feels like pure magic. So today, we're going to pull back that curtain. We're going to dig into the secrets of stop motion. So yeah, how do these puppets come alive? How does a sculptor and an animator take a lump of clay and metal and convince me, that it has a soul? Well, the answer, and this is the cool part, isn't just about what the animator does. It's actually about a fascinating little glitch in our own brains. Right? So this first part is all about the illusion of life. Because the real magic, the very first step, doesn't happen on some fancy animation set. Note, it happens right here inside your head. It's a biological trick, really, one that makes every single movie you've ever seen possible. And we're all just wired to fall for it. And it all kicks off with this idea called persistence of vision. The easiest way to think about it, it's like a tiny visual echo in your brain. When you look at something, your eye actually holds on to that image for like a split second after it's gone. It's this little biological glitch, this leftover image, that animators have learned to exploit with absolute genius. Okay, so here's how your brain gets tricked. It's a 1-2 punch. First, you see a static image. Your retina, as we just said, holds onto it for about a 15th of a second. But then, and this is key, before that little echo fades, bam, a new image appears that's just slightly different. Your brain, trying to make sense of it all, just fuses them together. It doesn't see two separate pictures. It literally invents the movement between them. That's a thing called the Phi Phenomenon, and it's pretty much the engine that drives all animation. So what's the magic number for this illusion to work? You need to hit a certain speed, right? Turns out our brains need to see at least 10 to 12 of these pictures or frames every single second to be fooled into seeing smooth motion. Any slower than that, and the whole illusion just falls apart. You'll just see a slideshow. All right, so we've got the science down, but knowing how the trick works is one thing. Actually controlling it is a whole different ballgame. Animators have basically created their own language, a grammar of movement, with rules and techniques to turn this simple illusion into something that's not just smooth, but also expressive and totally believable. A huge part of that grammar is this idea of animating on ones versus twos. Okay, what does that mean? Animating on ones is, well, it's the intense way. It means for every single frame of the film, you create a brand new, unique pose for the puppet. So if you're working at 24 frames per second, that's 24 tiny movements every second. It's insanely labor-intensive, but you get that buttery smooth motion you see in big-budget movies like Paranorman. But then you've got twos. This is the industry workhorse. Here, you create one pose, take a picture, and then you hold that same pose for a second picture before moving again. So you're only doing 12 movements per second. It cuts the work in half, and it's perfect for something like a TV series, like Shaun the Sheep. Let's break this down. In the real world, this is how it works. Feature films, they're usually 24 frames per second. So if you're animating on twos, that's 12 unique puppet movements you have to create for every single second of screen time. For TV, which is often 30 frames per second, you're doing 15 movements. And hey, if you're just starting out with an app on your phone, you might be at 10 or 12 frames per second, which means you only have to do 5 or 6 poses. It's always this big trade-off, right? You're balancing that super smooth motion against the sheer amount of time it takes to pull it off. But it's not just about the number of poses. It's about the spacing. This quote here, it looks a little weird, but it's a perfect visual for a huge animation principle. Ease in and ease out. Just think about it for a second. In real life, nothing just jerks into motion or stops on a dime, right? You speed up and you slow down. Animators mimic this by making the changes between frames really small at the beginning and end of a movement, and then making the changes much bigger in the middle. That's what gives everything weight and makes it feel real. Okay, enough theory. Let's get our hands dirty and head into the animator's workshop. To actually build this illusion frame by painstaking frame, animators need some seriously specialized tools, and it all starts with the character's skeleton. So every puppet has a skeleton, what they call an armature, and there are basically two kinds. On one hand, you've got wire armatures. These are pretty common for TV or indie stuff. They're cheap, they're flexible, but they have problems. The joints can get kind of bendy and weird, and if you bend the wire too many times, snap, it breaks. But then you have the ball and socket armature. This is the Porsche of the stop-motion world. It's this incredible precision-engineered skeleton made of steel joints. It's durable, it moves perfectly every single time. It's what they use for the big feature films, and it makes a world of difference. Okay, so you've got this beautiful, expensive puppet. How do you keep it from falling over? Or, more importantly, how do you make sure it stays in the exact same spot for hours while you're animating? The answer is tie-downs. The old-school way, you literally drill holes in the set and bolt the puppet's feet down. It is rock solid, but man, is it slow. That's why a lot of the big studios now, like Aardman, the Wallace and Gromit guys, use magnets. They build the set on a metal floor and they can just snap the puppets into place with powerful magnets. It's way, way faster and a total game changer for their workflow. All right, puppets ready, sets ready. You think you're good to go, right? Nope. Some of the biggest battles and animator fights are against these invisible enemies, tiny changes in the studio that can absolutely destroy hours and hours of work. First up, your arch nemesis, inconsistent light. Look, it can take an entire day to shoot just a few seconds of animation. So what happens if the sun moves or a cloud passes by? That tiny change in light creates this awful flicker in the final shot. It's like the #1 telltale sign of an amateur stop motion. So what's the solution? Absolute, total control. The pros work in studios that are basically black boxes, no windows, zero natural light. Sunlight is the enemy. Every single light is artificial, it's locked down, and it does not change. That way, the light in frame 1 is exactly the same as the light in frame 1000. The next big challenge, an unstable camera or set. I mean, think about it. The slightest, tiniest bump to the camera, the tripod, anything, it creates this awful, jarring jump in the final film. And poof, the illusion is gone. The world you've built no longer feels solid and real. The solution is something they call perfect registration. All that means is making sure the only thing that moves between pictures is the thing you're trying to animate, nothing else. So you use a super heavy tripod, you bolt down the set, you use those tie downs we just talked about to lock the character to the floor. Everything has to be locked in place to keep the magic alive. So when you put it all together, you take the science of how our brains see things, you add that grammar of movement, and you combine it with the super strict solutions to all these technical problems. That's when this incredibly difficult craft really becomes art, a powerful, timeless art form. And man, what a history it has. We're talking over 100 years of this stuff. It all started with these simple, magical tricks in films like The Haunted Hotel, way back in 1907. Then it just exploded with Willis O'Brien's mind-blowing work on King Kong. And who can forget the legendary Ray Harryhausen and that iconic skeleton fight in Jason and the Argonauts? All of that paved the way for the classics we know and love today, like The Nightmare Before Christmas, and eventually Coraline, which really pushed stop motion into a whole new era. Check out this number. To get all of Coraline's amazing facial expressions, the animators at Leica Studios did something revolutionary. They didn't resculpt her face for every shot. No way. They 3D printed thousands of individual replacement faces or parts of faces. This single innovation gave them, get this, over 200,000 possible facial combinations. That's a level of acting, of emotional nuance that was just impossible before. Which brings us to a final, pretty big question. We live in an age of flawless CGI, right? So why does this art form, this handmade, sometimes a little bit imperfect, tangible thing, why does it still have such a hold on us? What makes it endure? Maybe it's just that. Maybe it's because you can feel the artist's touch. You can almost see their fingerprints on every single frame, and that's what makes these little puppets in their tiny worlds feel so incredibly, wonderfully real.